During World War II, renowned behaviorist B.F. Skinner proposed one of military history's most bizarre weapon systems, pigeons trained to guide missiles to their targets. Project Pigeon, later renamed Project Orkan, involved conditioning pigeons to peck at images of enemy ships projected onto screens inside missile nose cones. The birds underwent intensive training programs where they learned to recognize specific target silhouettes and peck at them continuously. Skinner's system used the pigeon's pecking behavior to control the missile's steering mechanism through a sophisticated mechanical linkage. In testing, the pigeon-guided missiles demonstrated remarkable accuracy, with the birds successfully directing projectiles toward designated targets with precision that impressed military observers. 3 pigeons were used in each missile to provide redundancy and prevent individual bird errors from causing mission failure. Despite the system's proven effectiveness in trials, military officials ultimately rejected the project as too unconventional and unreliable for actual combat deployment. The idea of depending on birds to guide multi-million-dollar weapon systems struck commanders as absurd, even though Skinner's behavioral conditioning techniques produced genuinely impressive results that foreshadowed modern precision-guided munitions technology. The 1897 murder case of Zona Heaster Shue became the only known instance in American legal history where ghostly testimony contributed to a criminal conviction. Zona died suddenly just 3 months after marrying Erasmus Stew, with the local doctor hastily ruling her death natural despite limited examination. Zona's mother, Mary Jane Heaster, became suspicious and prayed for her daughter's spirit to reveal the truth. According to her testimony, Zona's ghost appeared to her on 4 consecutive nights, providing increasingly detailed accounts of her murder. The spirit allegedly demonstrated how Erasmus had broken her neck by rotating her head completely around, showing bruises on her throat as evidence. Armed with this supernatural information, Heaster convinced the prosecutor to exhume Zona's body for a proper autopsy. The examination revealed a broken neck and crushed windpipe, confirming the ghost's accusations. During the subsequent murder trial, the prosecutor carefully allowed Heaster to describe her spectral encounters without directly presenting them as evidence. The combination of physical evidence and the compelling ghost story convinced the jury to convict Erasmus Shue, making this the first and only case where ghostly testimony played a role in achieving justice. Before 1832, British medical schools faced a macabre supply problem that spawned an entire criminal industry of grave robbing. Legal sources provided only a handful of executed criminals' bodies annually for anatomical study, while medical education demanded hundreds of fresh corpses. This shortage created the resurrection men, professional body snatchers who operated sophisticated networks of grave robbing. These criminals worked with military precision, using specialized tools to exhume recently buried bodies without disturbing the soil's surface, making detection difficult. They sold fresh corpses to medical schools for substantial profits, creating a ghoulish marketplace in human remains. The practice horrified the public, leading to the use of mort safes, iron cages, over graves and hiring armed guards in cemeteries. The situation reached a tipping point with the Burke and Hare murders in Edinburgh, where the duo killed 16 people to sell their bodies rather than waiting for natural deaths. This scandal, combined with public outrage over grave desecration, forced Parliament to pass the Anatomy Act of 1832, which regulated the legal supply of cadavers to medical schools and largely ended the resurrection trade's brutal business model. In 1859, the death of a single pig nearly triggered an armed conflict between the United States and Great Britain over the disputed San Juan Islands. The crisis began when American farmer Lyman Cutler shot and killed a large black pig that belonged to the Hudson's Bay Company after it repeatedly raided his potato garden. The pig's owner, Charles Griffin, demanded $100 compensation, an enormous sum at the time. When Cutler refused to pay, British authorities threatened to arrest him, prompting American settlers to request military protection. The situation escalated dramatically as both nations deployed military forces. The Americans sent 461 soldiers with artillery, while the British responded with 5 warships carrying over 2,000 troops. For months, the two forces faced each other across the disputed territory in a tense standoff that could have erupted into full-scale war over the most trivial of causes. Fortunately, cooler heads prevailed when Rear Admiral Robert Baines refused orders to engage American forces, reportedly stating he would not involve 2 great nations in a war over a squabble about a pig. The only casualty of this absurd international incident was the unfortunate pig that started it all. During the brutal Battle of Shiloh in April 1862, wounded Union and Confederate soldiers lying in the muddy Tennessee battlefield began noticing an eerie phenomenon that seemed almost supernatural. As darkness fell, some of their wounds began emitting a faint blue-green glow, creating an otherworldly luminescence across the blood-soaked ground. This mysterious light, which soldiers dubbed Angel's Glow, appeared to be a divine sign offering hope amid the carnage of one of the Civil War's bloodiest battles. Even more remarkably, medical personnel later observed that wounds exhibiting this strange glow healed faster and showed significantly lower infection rates compared to non-glowing injuries. For over a century, this phenomenon remained unexplained and relegated to Civil War folklore. Modern microbiologists finally solved the mystery, discovering that Photorhabdus luminescens, a bioluminescent bacterium with natural antibiotic properties, had infested the battlefield's mud. The cool April temperatures and wet conditions created perfect conditions for this beneficial microbe to colonize wounds, providing both the ethereal glow and protection against harmful bacteria, literally creating a life-saving angelic intervention through biological processes. Cave Creek, Arizona maintains one of America's strangest legal documents, a framed deed claiming ownership of a human soul. According to local legend, in the 1880s, a drifter named David Talacht was gambling in the town's saloon during a particularly intense poker game. As the stakes escalated beyond his financial means, Talacht made a desperate wager that would become the stuff of local folklore. With nothing left to bet, he allegedly put up his immortal soul as collateral, signing a makeshift contract that transferred ownership of his soul to the town, should he lose the hand. When the cards were revealed, Talacht had indeed lost, making Cave Creek the legal owner of his soul, according to the bizarre agreement. The original document, written on rough paper and signed in what appears to be blood, was preserved by the saloon owner and eventually became a town curiosity. While clearly a novelty item with no legal standing, the deed remains framed and displayed as a macabre piece of local history. Residents joke about their town's unique possession, though some claim Talacht's restless spirit still haunts the area, forever bound to Cave Creek by his foolish gamble. On November 22, 1987, Chicago television viewers witnessed one of the most unsettling broadcast hijackings in media history during a transmission of Doctor Who on WGN-TV. At approximately 11:15 p.m., the regular programming was suddenly interrupted by a figure wearing a grotesque Max Headroom mask, a popular 1980s computer-generated character. The intruder appeared against a spinning metallic background, creating a disorienting and nightmarish scene. For over 90 seconds, this mysterious person delivered a rambling, largely incoherent monologue filled with bizarre references and nonsensical phrases while swaying hypnotically. The audio was deliberately distorted, making much of the speech incomprehensible and adding to the deeply unsettling atmosphere. Most disturbing was the intrusion's ending. The figure bent over and was apparently spanked with a fly swatter by an off-screen accomplice, while moaning and making strange noises. The broadcast then returned to normal programming as if nothing had happened. Despite extensive FBI investigations and a substantial reward, the perpetrators were never identified, leaving the incident as one of media's most notorious unsolved crimes and a source of urban legends about rogue broadcasters. During the 1930s, the Irving family's farmhouse on the Isle of Man became the center of one of paranormal history's strangest cases involving an alleged talking mongoose named Geff. The family claimed this creature, which they never clearly saw, lived in their walls and engaged in lengthy conversations with them daily. According to their accounts, Geff possessed remarkable abilities. He could speak multiple languages fluently, spy on neighbors and report their private conversations, recite gossip from around the island, and demonstrate knowledge of events happening miles away. The mongoose allegedly had a distinctive personality, often displaying a mischievous and sometimes malicious nature, throwing objects and making threats when angered. Investigators who visited the farm found evidence of thrown objects and heard unexplained voices, but could never definitively prove or disprove the phenomenon. The case divided experts between those who believed it was an elaborate hoax perpetrated by the family and others who considered it a genuine poltergeist manifestation. The mystery was never solved, and Geff supposedly vanished when the family eventually moved away, leaving behind one of paranormal research's most bizarre unsolved cases. Russian pianist Nicholas Rubinstein's final performance in 1888 became one of classical music's most disturbing legends, though historians debate its authenticity. According to the account, Rubinstein was performing a demanding piano concerto when he suddenly produced a razor blade and slashed both wrists during the performance. Rather than stopping, he reportedly continued playing with blood streaming from his wounds onto the piano keys and his formal evening wear. The audience initially thought the red stains were part of a dramatic stage effect until they realized the pianist was actually dying before their eyes. Witnesses described the horrifying scene of Rubinstein maintaining perfect technical execution, even as his life ebbed away, the music becoming increasingly frantic and emotional as blood loss weakened him. He allegedly collapsed at the keyboard only after completing the piece, dying several days later from his self-inflicted wounds. While some historians suggest this story may be apocryphal or exaggerated, it reflects the intense psychological pressures faced by 19th century virtuoso performers and the romanticized connection between artistic genius and self-destruction. The Tullimonstrum gregarium, discovered in Illinois coal deposits, represents one of paleontology's most baffling mysteries from 300 million years ago. This bizarre creature defies every attempt at classification, possessing a combination of features that seem impossible in any known animal group. The Tully monster had a soft, segmented body similar to a worm, but sprouted eyes on long stalks like a hammerhead shark. Most disturbing was its feeding apparatus, an elongated proboscis, tipped with a claw-like grasping structure containing rows of tiny teeth. No living animal possesses this combination of characteristics, making it impossible to determine where it fits in the evolutionary tree. Despite decades of study and thousands of well-preserved specimens, scientists cannot even determine if it was a vertebrate or invertebrate. The creature's alien appearance has led some researchers to joke that it looks more like something from another planet than Earth's ancient seas. Its classification remains so mysterious that it might represent an entirely extinct group of animals with no modern relatives, a biological dead end from the distant past. In 2010, the Dutch cargo vessel Marianne Vos became a modern ghost ship mystery when Australian authorities found it drifting unmanned off the coast. The discovery was immediately unsettling. The engines were still running smoothly, navigation equipment remained functional, and the ship appeared to be in perfect working condition. In the crew quarters, investigators found an even more disturbing scene. A freshly prepared meal was still set on the galley table with food still warm, suggesting the crew had vanished very recently. All life rafts remained secured to the vessel, indicating the 7 crew members hadn't abandoned ship voluntarily. Personal belongings, including wallets and identification documents, were left behind untouched. The final entry in the ship's log contained only 3 ominous words: strange noises outside. Despite extensive search operations covering thousands of square miles of ocean, no trace of the missing crew was ever found. Maritime authorities classified the case as an unexplained disappearance, leaving families without answers and maritime workers deeply unsettled by the mystery. The Yokosuka MXY-7 Oka represented the terrifying evolution of Japanese kamikaze tactics during World War II's final phase. This rocket-powered aircraft was essentially a flying bomb piloted by a suicide volunteer, designed to be launched from a bomber aircraft at high altitude before diving toward Allied ships. The Oka's most psychologically devastating feature was the horrific whistling scream it produced during its final dive. As the aircraft plunged toward its target at over 400 miles per hour, air rushing through specially designed wing vents created an ear-piercing shriek that could be heard for miles. This sound was deliberately engineered to terrorize Allied sailors, creating panic and psychological trauma before impact. Allied forces nicknamed it the Baka bomb, idiot bomb, but they genuinely feared encountering these weapons. The pilot had no escape mechanism and was committed to death from the moment of launch. While the Oka program killed hundreds of Japanese pilots, it achieved limited military success due to the difficulty of getting close enough to Allied fleets to launch effectively. On Christmas Day 1950, Scottish nationalists executed one of history's most symbolic heists by stealing the Stone of Scone from Westminster Abbey. The ancient stone, also called the Stone of Destiny, had been used in British coronations for centuries after being taken from Scotland by Edward I in 1296. 4 Glasgow University students planned the theft as a protest against English rule over Scotland. However, their carefully planned operation went disastrously wrong when they attempted to remove the 336-pound sandstone block from beneath the coronation chair. In their haste, they dropped the ancient artifact, splitting it into 2 pieces with a sickening crack that echoed through the abbey. Panicking but determined, they smuggled both pieces back to Scotland in separate cars. The broken stone was secretly repaired by a stonemason who was sworn to secrecy. After months of political tension, the students returned the stone to Westminster Abbey, but their bold act became legendary in Scottish independence movements, and the stone was eventually returned to Scotland permanently in 1996. The merchant vessel Joyita became one of the Pacific's most haunting maritime mysteries when it was discovered drifting in 1955, originally carrying 25 passengers and crew on a routine voyage between Samoa and the Tokelau Islands. The ship was found partially submerged weeks later, completely abandoned. The scene aboard was deeply disturbing. Cargo was scattered but not looted. The ship's pumps had been deliberately disabled, and most unsettling, a doctor's medical bag was found on deck with bloody bandages spilling from it. The lifeboats were missing, suggesting the occupants had abandoned ship, but no trace of the 25 people was ever found despite extensive search efforts. Radio logs showed the Joyita had sent a distress signal mentioning they were taking water fast, but then went silent. The mystery deepened when investigators discovered the ship was carrying a significant amount of undeclared cargo, leading to theories about piracy, mutiny, or something even more sinister that befell everyone aboard. The Hope Diamond carries one of history's most persistent curses, allegedly bringing violent death and misfortune to its owners for centuries. This magnificent 45-carat blue diamond was supposedly stolen from the eye of a Hindu idol in India, dooming anyone who possessed it. The curse appeared to manifest repeatedly. French merchant Jean-Baptiste Tavernier, who first brought it to Europe, was reportedly torn apart by wild dogs. King Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette owned it before their executions during the French Revolution. Later owners included Princess de Lamballe, who was beaten to death by a mob, and Lord Francis Hope, who suffered bankruptcy and marital destruction. The Evelyn Walsh McLean family, who owned it in the 20th century, experienced the death of their young son in a car accident, their daughter's suicide, and other tragedies, while scientists explain the diamond's eerie blue glow through trace amounts of boron. Believers in the curse point to the consistently tragic fates of its owners as proof of its supernatural malevolence. Mary Reeser's death in 1951 became one of the most puzzling cases associated with spontaneous human combustion. The 67-year-old widow was discovered in her St. Petersburg, Florida apartment reduced to a pile of ash and bone fragments, with only her left foot remaining intact. The baffling scene showed her chair completely destroyed, but newspapers just 3 feet away were undamaged, and the apartment's walls showed minimal fire damage. Investigators found no evidence of accelerants or external ignition sources, leading to widespread speculation about supernatural causes. The case fueled decades of myths about people spontaneously bursting into flames. However, modern forensic science explains the phenomenon through the wick effect. When external ignition, like a dropped cigarette, causes clothing to catch fire, human fat acts as fuel, creating temperatures hot enough to cremate bone while keeping fires localized. The slow-burning process can consume a human body over several hours while leaving surrounding areas relatively undamaged. During the 19th century, tuberculosis outbreaks in rural New England communities sparked genuine vampire panics that led to disturbing grave desecrations. When family members died from consumption, as tuberculosis was then called, and other relatives subsequently fell ill, desperate survivors concluded that the dead were rising to drain life from the living. The panic reached its peak when families began exhuming recently buried relatives to check for signs of vampirism. Due to natural decomposition processes, bodies often appeared fresh with blood in their mouths and groaned when moved due to escaping gases. Convinced they had found vampires, families would burn the heart and other organs, then feed the ashes to surviving sick relatives as a cure. The most famous case occurred in Rhode Island in 1892 when Mercy Brown was exhumed and her heart burned in a desperate attempt to save her brother from tuberculosis. These gruesome rituals continued until medical understanding of tuberculosis transmission finally dispelled the supernatural explanations. The 1813 Battle of Yerbas Buenas during Chile's War of Independence created one of history's most tragic demographic disasters. This small Chilean town sent virtually all its able-bodied men to fight against Spanish colonial forces in what became a devastating defeat. The battle was particularly brutal, with Chilean patriot forces suffering catastrophic casualties against better-equipped Spanish troops. When the smoke cleared, nearly every male from Yerbas Buenas lay dead on the battlefield. The survivors who returned home found a community transformed into something resembling a ghost town populated almost entirely by widows, orphans, and elderly residents. The town earned its sorrowful nickname, the Town of the Widows, as women, dressed in black mourning clothes, became the only figures seen walking the streets. For years afterward, the community struggled to survive economically and socially, with an entire generation of children growing up without fathers, in a society where women had limited rights and opportunities. One of nature's most disturbing phenomena occurred in Altenburg, Germany in 1828 when residents discovered the largest rat king ever recorded. A rat king forms when multiple rats become permanently entangled by their tails, creating a writhing mass of animals that cannot separate. The Altenburg specimen contained 32 rats whose tails had become so thoroughly knotted and matted with blood, dirt, and excrement that they formed a single, horrifying entity. The rats, unable to move independently, were forced to cooperate for survival, creating an unnatural collective organism. Historical accounts describe the discovery as deeply unsettling. Locals found the mass of rats in a chimney, still alive, but clearly suffering. Medieval societies viewed rat kings as extremely powerful omens of plague, famine, or war. The phenomenon likely occurs when young rats living in close quarters get their tails tangled in sticky substances, then panic and tighten the knots through their struggles to escape. Pablo Escobar's death in 1993 created an unexpected ecological nightmare in Colombia. The drug lord had maintained a private zoo at his Hacienda Nápoles estate, complete with exotic animals including 4 hippopotamuses imported from Africa. After his demise, authorities relocated most animals to proper facilities, but the hippos proved too dangerous and expensive to move. The 4 escapees found Colombia's climate perfectly suited to their needs, with abundant water sources and no natural predators. Without population controls, they bred prolifically, creating a growing environmental disaster. Today, over 100 hippos roam Colombian waterways, becoming South America's largest invasive species. These massive animals attack local fishermen, destroy crops, and disrupt ecosystems. Their waste pollutes rivers, while their territorial nature makes them extremely dangerous to humans. Efforts to control the population through sterilization have proven inadequate, leaving Colombia struggling with Escobar's bizarre and deadly legacy. Professional stuntman Todd Shriver attempted to break a world record in 1991 with a death-defying dive that lived up to its ominous name. His plan was to plunge from a platform 130 feet high into a children's inflatable pool containing merely 18 inches of water, a feat requiring perfect precision and technique. The stunt was designed to demonstrate how a professional could enter such shallow water safely through proper body positioning and speed control. However, Shriver miscalculated fatally. Instead of entering cleanly, he struck his head against the pool's bottom with devastating force. The impact shattered his cervical vertebrae, instantly paralyzing him from the neck down. Though he survived the immediate trauma, Shriver spent his remaining years as a quadriplegic, eventually dying from complications related to his injuries. His tragic attempt serves as a grim reminder of how quickly extreme stunts can transform from entertainment into life-altering catastrophe. In November 1970, Florence, Oregon faced an unusual problem. A massive 45-foot sperm whale had washed ashore and was rapidly decomposing, creating an unbearable stench. Local officials decided on a spectacularly misguided solution. They would use dynamite to dispose of the carcass, theorizing that the explosion would disintegrate the whale into small pieces for scavengers. Instead, they used half a ton of explosives in what became a legendary disaster. The blast launched enormous chunks of rotting whale blubber hundreds of feet into the air, raining putrid flesh onto horrified spectators who had gathered to watch from what they thought was a safe distance. One massive piece of blubber completely crushed a car parked over a quarter-mile away. The explosion failed to dispose of the whale properly, leaving large sections intact while covering the area in nauseating whale parts and traumatizing everyone present. Gloria Ramirez's death in 1994 created one of medical history's most disturbing mysteries. When the Riverside, California woman arrived at the emergency room, staff immediately noticed something wrong beyond her critical condition. Her body emitted a strange, sweet, fruity odor that intensified as they attempted treatment. During her care, multiple medical personnel began collapsing, nurses fainted, doctors developed breathing difficulties, and several were hospitalized. The situation worsened during her autopsy, when pathologists also became violently ill. Scientists theorized that Ramirez's cancer treatment medications, particularly DMSO, dimethyl sulfoxide, had metabolized in her body to create dimethyl sulfate, a highly toxic gas that essentially turned her corpse into a chemical weapon. The incident forced the hospital to evacuate areas and left medical staff with lasting health issues. earning Ramirez the haunting nickname the Toxic Lady. Medieval justice could be shockingly bizarre, as demonstrated in Falaise, France in 1386. A sow brutally attacked and killed an infant, leading to one of history's strangest legal proceedings. The pig was formally arrested, tried in court, and sentenced to death for murder. On execution day, townspeople gathered to witness the macabre spectacle. The condemned sow was dressed in human clothing, including a waistcoat, white gloves, and a human mask to mock human dignity. The pig was then publicly hanged in the town square while spectators watched. In a twisted display of medieval legal logic, the sow's piglets were brought to trial but acquitted due to insufficient evidence of bad character and their young age. This wasn't an isolated incident. Medieval Europe saw numerous animal trials reflecting society's belief that animals possessed moral agency and could be held accountable for their actions. In 17th century England, people lived in constant fear of witchcraft and developed bizarre protective rituals. When someone believed they were cursed, they would create witch bottles, ceramic containers filled with their own urine, bent pins, rusty nails, and strands of their hair. The theory was that these personal items would create a psychic connection to the victim. The bottle was then buried beneath the home's hearth or doorway threshold. According to folk belief, any curse directed at the homeowner would be redirected back through this grotesque vessel, causing the witch to experience excruciating pain or even death. Archaeological excavations continue to uncover these unsettling artifacts, revealing the desperate measures people took against supernatural threats in an age when medical science couldn't explain mysterious illnesses or misfortunes.